Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is a bonus episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Now, as ever, let's begin by banging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Today, I'm going to take you to meet portrait artist Julie Bennett. I first met Julie a couple of years ago at her solo exhibition to mark the end of her artist in residency at the Bankside Hotel in London. And I was introduced to her via a good friend of the podcast, Geeta Joshi. In this episode, we'll be speaking about Julie's previous life in the music industry, which then merged itself into the visual arts. She talks about her involvement in portraits for NHS heroes with her friend Tom Croft, and her latest exhibition that's in a police station nonetheless. So please, come with me as I spoke to Julie Bennett. Good to see you.
And you. We haven't really chatted before. Like, I remember you came to my private view at Bankside Hotel,
That's
the residency.
Yeah, that was a good show, wasn't it?
A really fantastic location. Yeah, really very successful show as well.
How long was you in there for?
6 weeks.
Wow.
And I was in every day. I worked really, really hard, like from about 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. for 6 weeks. I really it was just a fantastic way of focusing.
But when you get an opportunity like that, you've got to take hold of it, haven't you, and get the most out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Geeta Joshi had been speaking of you for a long time before I actually come to meet you. Yeah, so
yeah,
she'd always championed you.
Oh, thanks. I met Geeta through South London Women Artists.
That's it.
She did a talk, and it was like a Zoom talk to like sort of 20 women, but we seemed to get on really well, even in that Zoom talk with the other 19 women. You know, there was something that connected me and Geeta somehow. And how did you meet Geeta? How do you know
Just
Geeta?
through the podcast, because she was doing her podcast at the time, and this was like 4 years ago. She had the curator salon going. I had this going, and when I come across hers, it was someone in the art industry having a conversation rather than an interview.
Yes.
We got chatting and we said, well, why don't we do a crossover? So we met up at Damien Hirst's gallery.
Oh yeah.
One quiet Saturday afternoon, sat in the restaurant or the cafe there. I sat down and recorded with her, and she sat down and recorded with me, and got on great with her ever since.
Yeah, she's a great girl. She really is.
So how did you get into art? Was there art in the home growing up, or creativity?
Well, yes and no. My mum was obsessed with the portrait of the Mona Lisa.
Brilliant.
And so she had that in her bedroom, and I'd be a little girl, maybe sort of 6-year-old, and she'd say, don't touch that, don't go anywhere near it, that's the Mona Lisa, and she can see you anywhere in the room. If you go and stand over there, or if you go and stand over there, she can see you, she's looking at you. And she my mum made me believe that was like the most iconic painting in the world. And so I was very aware of portraiture, and also we lived by Dulwich Picture Gallery, which has got like the Rembrandts and stuff, and Mum was very proud that there was like the portrait of the girl at the window and other sort of portraits of Rembrandts there, and so she'd take me to see the portraiture at Dulwich Picture Gallery. She didn't paint. She was a musician, she was a pianist, but she made me very aware of painting when I think I showed an interest in painting.
Yeah.
And when I started to paint more prolifically, she'd say, "Oh, you don't get that from me, you get that from your dad." But my dad died when I was 4.
Oh,
So
right, okay.
so I didn't know, his
Yeah.
personality or what he made, other than my mum's stories.
So that's where the creative line came from.
Yes.
And how old were you when you started painting more prolifically?
At school, I got banned in the art class for painting Boy George. And they told me that I wouldn't be able to pass my O levels if I did paintings of Boy George for my O level.
Yeah.
So I decided to paint Boy George as a man rather than in his makeup and his hat and his hair. So I managed to source pictures of George with no makeup, and I painted them for my O level, and I passed.
Brilliant. I love it when the rules get bent to breaking point,
And so then, yeah, from school moved on to working in record shops, because music is a massive part of my life. But I was always making things, so I did a fanzine. I did a number of fanzines, so then I would do all the drawings and the layout of the fanzine. So friends would do the writing, and then I'd do the layout. So the sort of that kind of drawing wise was still going.
Yeah.
And then I decided to do an arts foundation, and then that was the moment where it was really hard to decide whether to be a painter or whether to be a graphic designer. I knew what a struggle it would be to make a living out of painting, that I decided to become a graphic designer. And so the creative line was there, but it was a more sort of sensible head of thinking, I need to have a career.
Yeah.
And I need to have training, and I need to have a trade. And so yeah, did graphics, and then but painting was always calling. It was always in the back of my head. And even when I was doing like magazine layouts and graphic design, I'd always be drawing or working with color and how colors work with each other within the work. And on the foundation course, the painting department would, don't go to graphics, don't go to the evil of computer, stay with us and paint. But yes, I went to the evil of the screen.
So how long was that?
So I worked as a graphic designer for 10 years, and I achieved my dream job, and that was to become art editor of NME, which was the New Musical Express.
Yeah.
And I became deputy art editor, and then art editor on their like one shots and stuff. And yeah, really loved that. And it was a crazy time with like say Razorlight, The Strokes, Oasis, non-stop in the office, so many hundreds of bands desperate to appear on the pages of NME, and would do anything to any of the NME staff to try and get their song heard. Like one day in the office, a couple of times, one day I was working, and about 7 bikini girls came running into the office, jumping on our desks, just in the most tiniest of bikinis with tequila. And it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and everyone was like, what? And they were like, drink tequila, listen to this song. And they were playing it on a handset sort of thing. Brilliant. And I did, God knows how they got through security. And
that's as if my dream has just come to real life.
And then another day, like when there's a carnival and those trucks have all like the sound systems on them. One time we were at the desk, working, another 11 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly out the window, we were something like 19th floor. We were 19th floor on the IPC tower, and yes, this truck came along, and you could hear every word that they were singing. They were trying to get us to,
of course,
and suddenly all this hampers of food and drink arrived at the office.
And how many of those actually worked?
We put a mention in the magazine.
Superb. So we're talking about your portraits, Julie. For anyone that may not know Julie Bennett, how would you describe your work?
Portraiture, and an absolute massive focus on the face, and not using any kind of symbols or background or anything to distract you from staring at the face. And the work is high gloss. It's heightened reality colors. It's very much a celebration of the paint. So the paint marks, the brush marks, the drips, everything that the physicality of the paint creates is important to me. Because it's what I want you to do is look at that and know that it's a painting. I don't want you to think it's been made in any other way. And I think that's a reaction to my graphic design work that's screen based, and that everything that we deal with today is screen and technology. And however fantastic screen and technology is, I want to go back to the tradition of painting and show you the process, the layering, the marks, the mistakes, the drips, the chance, the lack of control of something that's a runny, drippy medium. And we don't, everything is about perfection now. You hardly see ripped down posters these days on the street. They're just all digital displays, and nothing can really go wrong other than a few missing pixels, or it just blacks out. I want to see the imperfection of a craft, I think, as well. And I want to, my statement is painting is still relevant. Mark making, it creates such an excitement in my heart. Like when I look at marks of, Chantal Joffé or Marlene Dumas, I'll go to a show and think, Andrew Salgado's thick oil paint. It's just so exciting for me. Far more exciting than, a billboard on the street. I really want it to be about the paint.
You just mentioned a few artists there. If there was you and 5 other artists, past or present, what would your ideal group show be?
It would be something like, it would be called Celebration of Paint, and it would be Chantal Joffé, Jenny Saville, William de Kooning, Geraldine Swain.
Nice.
Was that 5?
I wasn't keeping count. We started off this conversation talking about your exhibition and residency at Bankside. Have you got anything coming up or in the pipeline at the moment?
Yes, I've got something very exciting, actually. I did 2 things in lockdown. And one was that I painted the NHS portraits for NHS heroes with the artist Tom Croft. Tom rang me and said, "Help! I've put something on social media, and
I've made a rod for my own back."
And he was like, "Help, Julie, help! I've offered to do a free portrait to an NHS person." And I was like, "That's a lovely idea." And he went, "And I've got 117 or something." Excellent. And I was like, "Oh." And he was like, "So I was wondering whether you could take 1 or 2 off me and do some portraits for free." Brilliant. And of course we couldn't get into the studio, nobody could go anywhere, and I thought, well, I might as well, and in a way there was nothing for us to be able to feel that we were useful. You know, who needs a painter when you're in an epidemic? You know, you need people from the NHS. And then, so if you can champion the NHS and make those people feel special, and oil painting, to, you know, so many people don't get painted, and you know, you'd never have the opportunity to have an oil portrait of yourself in life. And so, you know, I made 12 NHS portraits in the end during the 2 years really of the lockdowns, and each person I got to know, and it was a really special time, and very scary time, very emotional time, and endless time as well, that we never knew what was going to happen. And so I made all these portraits, and in the end I made a tea towel, and I raised money for healthcare workers, and I think I made about £2,000 selling tea towels over the lockdown of the paintings, and I gave my paintings to each NHS person. So I did that in lockdown. And the other thing I did was, I don't know if you've heard of ArtQuest. So ArtQuest is a peer mentoring organisation run by the University of the Arts to make a connection for artists, to create a dialogue in different subjects all around the world. And they advertised in lockdown that there was going to be a painting session, and that they were going to choose 10 painters, and they were going to put us in a Zoom room and start a dialogue basically about painting today, and how we're going to get through this lockdown, how we're not going to feel isolated, how we're going to make a connection, how we're going to be relevant. You know, never met each other, we all hadn't seen each other's work, and we chatted, I think it was about once every 2 weeks on Zoom for about an hour and a half. And we decided to do crits of each other's work, and crits of ideas for projects that we hadn't even done because we couldn't get into the studio, but we thought we would talk about our future work. And this became a crucial artistic conversation for me in lockdown with these 10 other artists, and we've kept it going. And then about 6 months ago, one of them said that they wanted to put on a real exhibition, real physical exhibition of our work, and that they were going to try and get a space. And then they said that they'd got an old police station in Hampstead called the Koppel Project Station, and there's about 7 police prison cells, and that we could all have a cell each, and then other artists can have like the reception or the hallway in the police station. It's a beautiful building. You know, for the very first time we met in real life. We've started a collective called All Together at Once, and 10 painters from all around the world. 5 or 6 of us met in Hampstead to see the space, and it was very eerie and very historic. It still felt very scary. It felt like you had been arrested walking into it, you know, and then seeing the cells and sitting in the cells and seeing all the writing, all the inscriptions on the doors. And so anyway, so we all said, this is an amazing space, and yes, we should respond to this space and put a show together. And so 9 of us are going to be showing in Hampstead Police Station from the 24th of August until the 3rd of September.
Okay.
I was like, who should I be painting to put into a cell in Hampstead? And so my first reaction was, Hampstead is so famous for homosexual activity. Any Londoner, the first thing that comes into their head, I would have thought, is that Hampstead's famous for gay sex on the Heath. Yeah. and that, you know, that's, if you're a gay man, that's where you go for to find somebody. And I thought, my God, the amount of men that must have been arrested, being caught on the heath and taken to Hampstead police station. I can't imagine how many men will have been arrested, but I'm sure it would be hundreds.
Yeah.
And it made me so angry, made me so sad. You know, where's the equality? I thought, well, this could be a chance for me to address that and think about how times have changed.
Yeah.
So I decided that I would paint 5 prominent homosexuals who have either been in my life because I was interested in their work, or, you know, they're either in their films or in their writing or in their music. And then I thought, actually, it would be a really interesting thing to do one from each era. So I started with Oscar Wilde. Brilliant. And because he was born in 1854, he wasn't pardoned for his homosexuality until 100 years after he died.
Mad, isn't it?
Yeah. And he was this most flamboyant character, and like, photography was around when Oscar was alive, so you can see lots of pictures of Oscar, and he's like, you know, direct eye contact, really proud of his flamboyant dandy self, and, you know, and the idea that he can't love somebody, you know, that he can't find love and he can't be proud of who he is. So I depicted him in the painting with a sort of sepia tone to sort of reflect the sort of historic time, and really quite, you know, no direct contact, because he had to keep his head down really to hide his sexuality. And so I tried to sort of put that into the work and create a vulnerability by still showing the ground within the piece. So you've got the painting of the face. The face is painted on a blue ground, and I've left some of the blue ground to show his kind of hidden self within the face.
Nice.
And then, yeah, so he was born in 1854. And so then I was thinking, oh, I need somebody, you know, a little bit later. So then I decided to go with Alan Turing. Perfect. And he was born in 1912. I didn't know that much about Alan, so it was a real interesting journey for me to find out about him.
One of the most shocking stories, how he was treated.
Yes.
For what he'd done as well, for Britain and the war.
Really shocking.
Disgusting.
And, you know, and I don't know if you've read much about his possible suicide.
Yeah.
That he went to see Snow White at the cinema, and she bites an apple.
Yeah.
And his body was found with a half bitten apple beside his bed, with the smell of cyanide everywhere. You know, they can't guarantee that was definitely suicide, but it's more than likely. You could either be imprisoned or you could have castration through chemical castration. So he decided to have chemical castration, which then made him develop breasts. You know, it's absolutely appalling for a man of his dignity, you know, the dignity of him and the importance of him and how he's helped Britain. And that's how we treated him, just because he wanted to love a man.
He was as important in the Second World War as Montgomery, without question.
Yes. So with the painting, there was no photographs of Alan in colour. He died in 1954, and so colour photography hadn't really come in. So I really wanted to depict him in colour, and I'd read that he had these beautiful blue eyes. So I've really sort of concentrated and done a real reference to those. But what I've also done is put the court proceeding papers in the background. So you can see, you know, what they were saying about him, that he was gross indecency and how he was arrested, and all of that text is in the background of the paintings. so to continue the timeline, so it was Oscar and then Alan, and then I decided to do Derek Jarman. And
yeah, nice.
Derek was always in my life, so when I'd go clubbing and stuff, I'd either see Derek clubbing. A friend of mine was his a painting assistant, and so I was always aware of him. And I'm reading this book at the moment. It's called Jarman at Your Own Risk, and there's this fantastic paragraph that I thought I'd read to you because I think it's really good.
Okay.
For the first 25 years of my life, I've lived as a criminal, and the next 25 years were spent as a second-class citizen, deprived from equality and human rights, no right to adopt children, and if I had any children, I could be declared an unfit parent, illegal in the military, an age of consent of 21, no right of inheritance, no right of access to a loved one, no right to the public affection, and no right to an unbiased education, no legal sanction of my relationships, and no right to marry. These restrictions deprived me of my freedom. It seemed unthinkable it could be any other way, though, so I just had to accept it. Thankfully, homosexuality was decriminalised in his 20s, but he was arrested in 1992 for a gay protest. He died before the age of consent was equaled. So much he didn't see, as and so, but yet he saw so much that Oscar and Alan didn't. Derek kind of lived in the middle of the two, and so he saw what it was like to be arrested for gay sex, and then he saw it decriminalized. So he was he's like the middle of my timeline for the Hampstead show. The last two is Ollie Alexander, from the lead singer of Years and Years, and he was in that series It's a Sin.
That was amazing series, wasn't it?
Yes, a fantastic series, and very educational, I think, for a lot of people that didn't really know what it was like to live in London as a gay man in the sort of the 80s, really, and how much homophobia there was.
I mean, to be honest, I've done that myself. I was told on the telly that it was a disease caused by gay men.
Yes.
So, and then it was spreading over from the gay community into the wider community. So, yeah, I was one of those in the 80s through ignorance who was going, what are you doing to us,
Yes. And it just shows you the homophobia of the media.
Yeah.
And just the lack of any education or money thrown into the gay community to help them. They were shunted. It was just like, oh, quick, lock them up again. What have we done? It was really.
Well, as I mentioned earlier about working in Heavens, which was maybe 5 years after the era that we're talking about at the moment, that was the best thing I ever done, was work there, because all the prejudiced misinformation that I had stored up here, because I used to read The Sun, that's where I got all my information from.
Yeah.
And that's what I had inside me. And then it got all deconstructed in the 18 months that I was working in Heaven's nightclub.
Yes.
And it sort of, just makes you see the other side of the coin and the correct way of living.
Ollie Alexander, obviously, he was born in 1990, which was only a couple of weeks ago, I think. And reading and hearing him speak now, there's still he talks about internalized homophobia. So he talks about how school saw him as other. You're not born thinking, woohoo, I'm gay. You'd look at him and think, oh, I've painted him in this see-through vest and he's biting his tongue and he's looking ever so sexy, and he's very proud of his sexuality. But he talks about this internalized homophobia, that you still don't feel that you're worthy. You don't feel that it's it's, you know, it's just normal. It's still, even though that was like 30 years ago, you know, or 20 years ago at his school, he said that, you know, he was bullied. And you know what, it's an awful thing that kids that are born gay still feel that they shouldn't be gay.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, you know, it'd be like blue eyes, brown eyes, you know, you can't help your eye color, so why should you be bullied for it, you know?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like he said that he was self-harming, that he had bulimia because of his homosexuality. And yet we've come so far from, say, Oscar and Alan Turing and stuff, and now you've got this gorgeous boy, you know, and there's still so much homophobia.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's as if the fundamentals have been leveled, and now we're just working on the details of,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
then
it's been decriminalised. It's hard to even think it was ever criminalised.
Yeah,
Especially
absolutely.
as the ones making the laws were the ones that were breaking the laws at the time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then the last painting I've done is of Anne Lister. And Anne Lister was born in 1791.
Oh, okay. The other end of the timeline.
And she was the first out lesbian. Now,
Oh,
all
wow.
of my paintings are going to be hung in the cell in the police station, but the only one that's not going to be in the cell is Anne Lister. So she's going to be on the outside of the cell, because lesbianism was never illegal. It was never, you know, it was invisible. Women were invisible. Women's sexuality was invisible. And so, you know, the idea that these guys were being arrested, castrated, imprisoned for something so natural to them, to want to be held and want to be loved.
Yeah.
And so she's on the outside of the cell because the state just didn't recognize lesbians.
Yeah.
And the BBC just did a recent drama series called Gentleman Jack. It's her life story.
Okay.
And so that's how she came into my world recently, just by seeing Gentleman Jack on the telly. And again, because photography didn't exist, there's a couple of oil portraits of the real Anne Lister, but there's talk of them not being realistic, or they haven't captured her. So I decided to actually paint Saran Jones, the actress who played Anne in the BBC series, because that's who my Anne Lister is.
Of course. Brilliant.
And the real Anne, she started relationships with women. She called them the fairer sex, and that she would only sleep with the fairer sex. She documented all her sexual encounters in a diary, but she wrote code. So it's actually like Egyptian hieroglyphics. You know, it's really, you know, you'd never be able to read it. And she wrote years and years and years of her diaries in this code. And people have been doing PhDs in decoding them, and they're very sexually explicit of what she's done with all these different women. And she was quite very popular in Halifax. And so I've actually copied a page from the diary as the background to the painting.
Excellent.
Because it's just, even just the text itself is a beautiful thing to see. They're the characters that I'm showing in the police station.
And what's the dates of this?
So the dates of the show of the Couple project is the 24th of August until the 3rd of September 2020.
And whereabouts can we find the Couple project?
It's Hampstead Tube Station, and it's just down the high street. It's the old police station. But you can, if you look on Instagram, on either my page, Julie_Bennett, 2 N's 2 T's, or the Couple project, KOPPEL. So you'll see about the show on both of those Instagram accounts.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And so the other 9 artists are doing either site-specific work about isolation, about crime, and it's a painting show. So it's the bottom line is it's all about paint.
Okie dokie.
See you later. It's
Julie,
lovely to see you, and
you.
hopefully see you again at a show or something, or we'll do something.
Julie,
Bye.
all the best. See you later. If you've got an exhibition or any other creative project within the arts, or even just want to promote your own artwork, you could do that in podcast form, similar to the one you've just listened to. They start at a convenient price point that is comfortable for any artist working on a budget. This podcast itself is created by working artists, and we know how important that is. So to find out more information, you can email us on ministryofartsorg@gmail.com or on Instagram @ministryofartsorg. Ta-da!